We're live now, Chair.
Good
Thank you
morning.
very much. Yeah, Chris, I think
Sorry,
you were
Rob.
going to do an introduction.
Just a quick introduction for everybody, if that's okay. Morning, everybody. Apologies for the slightly late start this morning due to some technical issues we've had our side. The board will be aware, obviously, that our previous board chair, David, stepped down at the end of May. And with so much going on within the LGPS and the pensions environment at the minute, we thought it's important to push on with our meetings that are already scheduled. So today, Aon have very kindly volunteered to provide some interim support for us whilst we work through the reappointment of a new pension board chair. So today we're joined by Laura from Aon, who's going to do an interim chairing responsibility for us today and take us through the rest of this meeting. So just a quick introduction from me. So I'll hand over to you now, Laura, for the rest of the meeting, if that's okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the Powers Pension Board. Welcome to Graham and Ian, who are pension board members today. I'm pleased to have Carrie-Anne and Gemma to keep us on track, and Chris, who'll be delivering the reports for us. And also welcome to Jane and Mary, who are joining the meeting, so our Section 151 and Deputy Section 151 officers. So thank you for attending. It's actually a pleasure to be here standing in as pension board chair until you find your new independent board chair. So as Chris said, my name's Laura. I'm an actuary and a governance consultant at Aon. And just to remind everybody that the board's role is to assist the administering authority in securing compliance with LGPS regulations, overriding legislation and the requirements of the pensions regulator, and also to help ensure the effective and efficient governance and administration of the fund. So we do have a reasonably full agenda today. So lots of operational administration updates, LGPS governance, which is a big ticket item, and an update on the Wales Pension Partnership development. So lots to talk about. I believe, just moving on to apologies, I believe we have apologies from David Powell. But as we have both an employer and a member representative present, we are quorate, so we can continue on that basis, although there are no decisions to be made today. Moving on to declarations of interest, which is item number 2. I think I should probably just note that I do work for Aon, who provide actuarial advice to the administering authority. But to date, I've not done any actuarial or governance work for the fund, and we have information barriers in place in our organisation. So there's nothing I'm aware of which would compromise my ability to carry out this interim role independently, particularly given the topics on the agenda. Does anyone else have any other interests they would like to declare and have noted? Okay, I think we can move on to the next item then, which is minutes of the last pension board meeting. So this was 20th of May 2026. Chris, are you okay to, yeah, okay, you're scrolling through. Brilliant. I've got it on
Hopefully you
the
can all see
screen.
that. Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Brilliant. So obviously I wasn't at the meeting, but I have watched the recording and I have no comments on the minutes. Ian and Graham, do you have any comments or suggestions you would like to make for the meeting minutes?
No, nothing from me.
Okay. Brilliant. So can one of you please propose this as a true record as Chris is scrolling through?
Can we just
Yeah,
check?
I can.
Is Graham there? We haven't lost Graham, have we?
Graham is present in the meeting.
Okay.
Yeah, he's still here.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
I'm happy
Sorry,
to
I cut you off.
propose
Yeah.
any question.
Brilliant. I don't know if maybe Graham's got his turned his sound off or something, perhaps.
Yeah, I think
maybe.
Graham's having trouble with his microphone. I'll see if I can unmute. I can ask to unmute and see if that works.
Otherwise, if Graham can hear, he could put something in the chat.
So I Graham has contacted me to say he can hear us, but he's
Okay.
struggling with his microphone. So I've just asked him to respond in the chat, and then if we have a show of hands, he should still be able to raise his hand to show approval that way. I see. Okay. So Graham's Zoom has frozen. That's what he's telling me.
Does that mean he won't be able to?
Yeah, so none of the
Excellent.
buttons are working for him on his screen currently.
Okay. Is it worth us coming back to this item when things
Yes,
are
please,
working?
Chair.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, fine. We'll move on to matters arising then. So I think there's sort of a lengthy separate update, but I think we'll just draw attention to the fact that a number of the matters arising from the previous meeting are going to be picked up elsewhere on today's agenda. So the regulators' compliance, governance reforms, WPP developments, the risk register, and administration performance. So there were a couple of updates mentioned on the risk register at the last meeting. So Chris, have those been actioned in the
Yes,
updated version?
I was
Yeah.
going to pick that up as part of the risk register item, Chair, before we dove
Brilliant.
into the administration risk register. Yeah.
Excellent. And I know the last meeting mentioned the actuarial valuation, but that process is now complete with the report being submitted to the Scheme Advisory Board. So the Pension Board will likely be interested in the GAD review under Section 13 of the Public Service Pensions Act, but we're not expecting that till next spring. That will indicate if the, Government Actuaries Department believes the valuation's been carried out in line with the regulations and their expectations. So that would be of interest to the Pension Board when that happens. Aha, Graham has his hand up.
Hello, apologies. I could hear everything you were saying. I was trying to say
Excellent.
yes. I happy to accept the minute the last. So yeah, just to record that.
Okay. So do we still need a show of hands for?
Yes, please, Chair, just
Yeah.
from committee members.
So as a true record, yeah. Okay. Perfect.
I haven't seen a hand from Ian Jones. You can just raise your hand physically to the camera. That would be fine.
Yeah.
Thank
there we
you.
go.
Thank you, Ian.
Lovely. Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Graham. Brilliant. Okay. So Ian, Graham, would you like to raise any other matters arising that's not covered elsewhere on the agenda?
No, nothing from myself. Thank you.
No, nothing from me.
Brilliant. Okay, right. Fantastic. We can move on to the minutes of the committee meetings. So this was the Pension Investment Committee held on 25th of March 2026 and 25th of June 2026. So Chris, I think you've got these on the screen now.
They should be in front of you now, Chair. Yeah.
Yeah. So on pages 14 through 16, I did see the committee were asking lots of questions that I would expect to see around the new pooling arrangement. And so they're familiar because they're very similar to questions I've seen from other committees on other pension funds. So I think they do reflect how significant these changes are. So just wanted that kind of noted that those were really good, sensible questions. And then I also noted the 30% uplift on the budget for admin resources, which is really positive given the amount of work that's already around and coming down the line. And we've got an admin update later on, Chris, to cover this. So I think that's good as well. And then the meeting on the 25th of June was just to confirm the new committee chair and vice chair, I believe. So does anybody have any questions or comments on those meeting minutes? They're not for approving, they're just for noting. No, Ian's shaking his head. Anything from you, Graham? No, I think that's a no. Okay, so we're happy to note those meeting minutes, so thank you for that. Chris, presumably there was nothing you wanted to add on that item.
Not in particular, Chair. We'll be picking up things as we work through the agenda. So
Yeah,
it's fine.
brilliant. Lovely. Okay, fantastic. So the next item on page 21 of the pack, which is item 6. So this is the operational and administration report and update. This report highlights key industry developments relevant to the Pension Board. the focus on governance, administration, regulatory compliance, etc. So I'll invite Chris to introduce the report. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you very much, Laura. Yep, so morning, everybody. This, as Laura's framed, is the report that I present at each meeting, just trying to pick out the key bits of development within the LGPS and the wider industry. I've tried to capture them at a fairly high level because there is so much going on. So much, in fact, there's a separate paper following this one on just the governance aspects alone of the new regulations. So this one, it won't dive into those too much, but it will hopefully provide some useful information for board in respect of other areas of the LGPS. So if we start with 2.2, on the 30th of June, the two sets of regulations came into effect. One in respect of essentially the pooling side of the government's reforms to the LGPS, and the other one in respect to the governance side of things, which I'll pick up in the following paper. Quite helpfully, on the 29th of June, so the day before the regulations took effect, the MHCLG also released the statutory guidance which accompanied those regulations. So we've been working through that since then, identifying the areas that we'll need to focus on initially over the next 6 months, but also in the longer term as well. So some high-level bullet points from that statutory guidance are captured in the bullet points in front of you. Those around the investment strategy statements, the asset pooling requirements, governance requirements, knowledge, understanding, expectations, independence governance reviews, and the roles of the LGPS senior officer and independent person. That's 6 bullet points, which are capturing quite a lot actually. Asset pooling requirements is such a significant change for us in Wales because, as you'll be aware, we've had to develop the WPP investment management company, which has been a significant piece of work for the past 18 to 24 months, and we're just about there in terms of getting that over the line. Again, I'll pick that item up as an individual item later on the agenda. But within those 2 sets of regulations alone, there's an awful lot that we have to do, and we'll work through those as we move through now. 2.3 is just identifying that there's been a slight tweak to some previously published regulations to capture some typographical and cross-referencing errors within the miscellaneous amendments. I just wanted to remind board that the 2 sets of regulations we saw on the 30th of June follow a previous set of regulations which came into effect in April as well. So that's 3 sets of regulations we've seen within the first couple of months of the financial year. So a lot is happening, and you'll see me pulling that out a lot as we work through these next couple of reports. Just moving swiftly on then. 2.4 is just making board aware that there's been a change to the SCAPE discount rate, which has affected various calculations that the admin team do. Very pleasingly, though, the Government Actuaries Department have acted very quickly on this, and they've issued some new actuarial factors. We've already received the first batch, and I believe the second batch arrived earlier on this week as well. So you've seen quite a lot of those factors which we were waiting for as a result of this change, the SCAPE rate, have already arrived, which is good. Otherwise, you end up in a position where you're having to revisit calculations, or what would probably happen is you'd stockpile them and wait for these factors to arrive. So we've not had to do that very much in this case because the factors have been delivered quickly. But again, I just wanted to make board aware that that is another impact on the team that we've had to work through over the past couple of months. Moving very quickly on to 2.5, I thought it was particularly for Ian as a scheme member rep. The LGA produced a promotional toolkit for the LGPS, and this has been designed primarily for employers to use to engage with their employees, both scheme members and non-scheme members, to promote the LGPS. I think it's been acknowledged that the LGPS is a very, very beneficial scheme for scheme members. So this toolkit has been designed to help promote how beneficial the LGPS or membership of the LGPS is to potential members and existing members as well. So those 5 bullet points there capture what's been produced, and the hyperlink at the bottom of page 22, it takes you straight through to the page where these resources are. From a fund perspective, we'll work through these as well to see if there's anything that we can incorporate into our literature and our scheme member communications, but we'll also work with our employers to make them aware of the availability of this and encourage them to disseminate this information further to their actual employees as well. So there'll be a communications piece that we'll carry out off the back of this toolkit being made available. But it's a real positive step forward in my view. Looking at 2.6, we'll go into McCloud in a bit more detail, a later item on the agenda, but I just wanted to make board aware that the Treasury has issued their 4th set of rectification regulations around McCloud. And the reason I wanted to include this was just to to identify that and reinforce that McLeod has been such a big piece of work for pension arrangements, including the LGPS, that the Treasury is now on their fourth set of tax rectification regulations to try and capture all the scenarios. It doesn't all affect the LGPS, but I've just pulled out in those 3 bullet points there, the areas of the LGPS which it does have an impact in, and our team need to be aware of that. One other point I'd just like to draw out off the back of this is the fact that our administration team now not only have to administer the LGPS, but they have to have understanding of the associated tax arrangements around the LGPS that frame the pensions industry as well. It's not that they have to be tax experts, but they have to understand the impact of tax on the LGPS as well. So that's another area which they have to develop their understanding on. And that continues into 2.7 actually, because HMRC have issued some technical notes around the impact of the changes to the tax regime, and primarily within the LGPS on the abolition of the lifetime allowance, how we used to use that when forming certain calculations within the LGPS, and the way its impact on trivial commutation lump sums as well. I'll just move on to 2.8 before I stop at point 3 for any further comments and just a catch up on what I've just covered. But 2.8 is the final area I just wanted to draw board's attention to in respect of changes. This one's important because this is in respect of arrangements where employers might have salary sacrifice arrangements in place. So if we think about those employers that might have something like a salary sacrifice AVC arrangement, there are some changes coming in 2029 which introduce a threshold where national insurance contributions receive the greatest benefit. So whilst it's not an immediate requirement for us to work with our employers on this one, there will be a need for us before April 2029 to have the conversation with our employers so that they're understanding the impact of these changes, i.e. it's introducing this threshold that wasn't there before. So that's a really whistle-stop tour of what's happened, what is happening, and what is coming down the line. There's quite a lot there, Chair, which I've skipped through at quite a pace. So I'm happy to stop there before I move on to the Scheme Advisory Board section of the report. If you've got anything you wish to add on any of these, because you'll have seen this across the board as an actuary and governance expert as well. Is there anything that you wanted to add before I move on at all?
I mean, I think the main comment is just the sheer amount of change and whether you're sort of from a risk perspective, you're comfortable there's enough resource to handle all of this change. It is the Pension Board's role to make sure that the administration can continue to function and things like that. It just feels like an awful lot all at once, and that's reflected across the LGPS.
Yes, that's fair. And I think we carried out a resources review in 2024, the summer of 2024. So that's 2 years ago now. And this has actually happened since then as well. So I think within the decision that the committee made back in the end of 2024 was an agreement to review the resource after 18 to 24 months. We're at that period now. So I think it's safe to say that we're regularly reviewing the resource of the administration team, and you've already reflected the fact that the committee agreed to an uplift of the budget at a recent meeting as well, to try and capture the fact that there is so much going on in terms of changes and the McLeod work as well. So yeah, it's something we're keeping a very close eye on. Okay, if there's no further...
And then in relation to item 2.5, this...
Yeah.
Oh, hello?
Hello, Laura. Can you hear us?
Sorry, yeah, just in relation to 2.5. Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, apologies, Chris, for interrupting you there. I think the technology just had a bit of a blip. So just looking at 2.5, I just obviously the government is quite focused on fairness between members, and this change to make people more aware of the benefits may help reduce things like the gender pension gap, and which is something you report now in your valuation report, and other gaps that exist in membership characteristics like culture or religion and that sort of thing. So I think that will be helpful. Does this toolkit, do you know if it is in Welsh language as well? Is there stuff available for members in Welsh, or is it just English?
I don't know. I'd imagine it's probably just in English initially, but I knew there's communications, an All Wales communications group actually, which look at these sorts of things. So if it's not in Welsh, it's certainly something we'll be encouraging and looking to, particularly if we're publishing on our websites, it probably will have to be translated anyway. So I don't know is the answer, but it's something
Okay.
we'll have to consider if we use these tools. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks, Chris. And Graham and Ian, did you have anything else you wanted to ask before we move on to the next part of this section?
No, nothing from me.
Brilliant, thanks, Ian.
No, the salary sacrifice, obviously, from the employer side is going to be something we need to consider, but I'm aware we'll be having further discussions on that anyway.
Brilliant, thanks, Graham. Right, back over to you, Chris.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so this next area is just moving on a bit from the changes. This is looking a bit more retrospectively, actually. And just let board know that the Scheme Advisory Board have published their 2025 annual report. It's hyperlinked in 3.1, and just some bullet points there, which I thought board would be interested in. The message behind this is basically the LGPS continues to grow. If you could summarize all those bullet points into one, it would be that is the case. And that's captured in the first bullet point there. Up to 6.81 million members in the 24-25 year. So it's getting closer to 7 million members of the LGPS. Over 2.2 million pensioners were paid during the year. The total assets of the LGPS increased to 402 billion, up from 390 billion. And that's those three bullet points are essentially just painting the scale of the LGPS. It's enormous. And it places a lot of responsibility on us to have to manage those numbers appropriately. The next couple of bullet points look at how the asset allocation of the investments are split. So I won't go into that in too much detail. It's there for information. The last two bullet points are probably something worth touching on because we've already touched on increasing costs within the LGPS. Those last two bullet points capture the fact that investment management costs increased, and some figures in there for information by 152 million. We've seen that locally. Our investment costs, because it's percentage based, the more your assets you have under management, the costs go up in line with that essentially. But the last bullet point there is picking up what we've already discussed about the administration and governance costs are increasing. Again, that's something we have seen locally, and that is off the back of all those previous items that I just mentioned earlier on. The LGPS is changing. It's gone through a significant period of change over recent years. And I've mentioned that in previous meetings as well. And that has been reflected in the cost it takes to run the scheme as well. That has increased alongside those changes. So just some stats there in those bottom two bullet points, which board will likely be interested in terms of we have seen that locally, and that is mirrored across the LGPS as a whole as well. 3.2 then is, and 3.3, I'm not going to go into any detail. Those are presented for your information. More detail on those 2 points are available on the hyperlinks within those individual items. I was going to move on to 3.4, which is probably more interest. Well, probably not more interest, but will be of interest to the Pensions Board, simply because it's a new forum that exists for the Pension Board Chair. So the Scheme Advisory Board is launching a new forum, and the first meeting will take place virtually on the 7th of September. It's going to be tight for us in respect of having a chair in place by the 7th of September, I think. Realistically, because we're going to be carrying out a procurement exercise, knowing the length of time that takes, and then interviews and whatnot, to have a chair in place by the 7th of September will be tight. I don't think it'll be impossible, but realistically, I have to be realistic with this. We might not be able to get a chair there on the 7th of September. If we can, I'll certainly encourage them to attend if they can. But I'll keep board updated on that. If we can get a representative there, then I'll make sure that we can do that. But the intention behind this forum is essentially to bring together the chairs from across the LGPS to share experiences and common knowledge. Working so closely as we do across Wales as part of the Wales Pension Partnership, for example, and the Pensions Officer Group, we've gained so much as a fund from collaboration. I think this is another opportunity for us to be able to collaborate within the industry. So I'm hoping that getting the chairs together, even virtually around a virtual table, will help benefit the LGPS as a whole, but also us in Wales and particularly at Powys as well. So a new forum, and we'll do our best to make sure we get some representation there if we can. If we can't get them to the first one, we'll certainly at least get them to the next one. We should be in a good place by then. Okay, moving on to pensions dashboards. Again, just to reassure board that we connected to the ecosystem in the timelines that are expected of us by the end of October 2025. But the message being delivered to us from the regulator essentially is captured in that last sort of paragraph on that page there. The successful connection to dashboard isn't the end of the process. It's actually just the start of it. There's a lot that's going to be expected of us as administrators once the dashboard is launched, because it's so reliant on data. We're going to have to make sure that our data is in top condition. And what I'm actually working through now with the governance and communications systems officer and the pensions administration manager is our data quality policy, data management policy. We have got one and it's published. That's currently going to be reviewed and looked at to make sure that it captures the requirements of the dashboard and the expectations placed on us by the regulator in respect to this. So data is key. We are looking at the policy around that. We are building processes to make sure that we've got what we need in place to keep on top of our data. Because ultimately, once the dashboard launches, because it's a new initiative, we don't know the impact on the admin team until this goes live. So the more we can help the position by having good quality data is an important thing for us. So we are looking at that. But I guess I just wanted to reinforce that a lot of time has been spent on this at a fund level, and we do intend to follow that key message that just connecting is not the end of the road for us. We do want to make sure that we help our members through this journey as well. Chair, was there any comments because I'm aware that you'd have seen pension dashboard discussions elsewhere. Is there anything that you wanted to add before I just moved on to the regulator part of the report?
Yes, I had. Thanks, Chris. I had heard that some software providers were expecting an increase in queries of about 30% or something like that. That was a statistic that was not because the data isn't of good quality, or it's just because people will think they're in one fund, or the dashboard might suggest they're in another, and they'll just be asking questions far more than they were before. So, but that is assuming that people engage with the dashboards as much as we hope they will. But even then, I think being prepared for initially at least a lot more queries than you might have had before. It might calm down after a while, but at least you maybe find that you don't have missing members who don't come and claim their pensions. So it's positives but things that risks you need to be aware of and manage, I suppose.
Absolutely, and the timescales attached to these queries as well. I believe it's a 10-day turnaround for any dashboard related data queries.
Mm-hmm.
So if a member has a query, that would then filter through to the fund, and we have a 10-day, it's probably a 10 working day period to turn that around back to dashboard. So if we get a surge of queries on day one, that's obviously going to have an impact on the administration team. So we are aware of it, we are watching it, but until it launches, we don't really know, as the chair says, what the engagement will be either. So we're trying to be prepared as much as we can. Okay, thank you. I just want to spend a little bit of time on item 4, if that's okay. And this is regarding the use of AI, so artificial intelligence within the pensions industry and obviously the LGPS, which we operate within. The regulator has a couple of bullet points there in 4.1. Has published a couple of documents which will probably be of interest to board in respect of their plan and the press release about the publication of that plan. We are expecting some more guidance to follow from the regulator in respect of the use of artificial intelligence within pensions industry. And until we receive that, we're having to adopt best practice essentially, because we're aware, I've heard some stats about the number of people actually using AI when it comes to retirement planning. And obviously that's not financial advice, that is using a tool which is publicly available. And our messaging to our scheme members when it comes up essentially at this point is just be careful. Be careful what data you're putting into AI, because you don't know where that data is going. You don't know how it's been used and whatnot. So there's definitely something that needs to happen within the industry when it comes to the use of AI around pensions. So our messaging to our scheme members at this stage, as I say, is just be careful how you use it. So we're looking at how we best include that sort of messaging within our literature. So our letters, for example, could include, when we send out an estimate to our scheme members, we could include something along the lines of, we're aware that scheme members are using artificial intelligence, just be careful how you use it, etc. But at this point, it's really a high-level message. We're waiting for some more detailed guidance and some more documentation to be published so that we can better steer our scheme members. I know it's been discussed as an industry, so things will filter through, I expect, in the not-too-distant future about how we use it as well. But it's not just the scheme member side. There's also the use of AI from a fund side as well. We have to have considerations about how me and our team use artificial intelligence, that we use it appropriately and accordingly, and in line with the council's AI policies and strategies as well. So growing area. If you go to any industry events, AI is probably top of the agenda now. We see lots of presentations on it. In fact, I attended a webinar about it earlier in the week. So I guess it's just to reinforce the board that we're aware of it. We're expecting guidance to come in the not too distant future. And in the meantime, the messaging that we're delivering is to our scheme members is just be careful about how you use it. And remember, it's not financial advice. It is a tool and a bit of software that is providing answers to the questions that you feed it. Laura, I just wanted to come back to you on that one, if that's okay, before I move on. Again, you might have some exposure to discussions around AI in the wider industry. Have you got any comments before we move on at all?
Yeah, Chris, I think you've covered everything. I was going to say, we've heard examples of members uploading their benefit statements to ChatGPT, for example, which, they're just giving away their data for free, so I think it is important, as you say, to make members aware of that. But as you say, it makes sense to wait until you've got that guidance, which is expected mid to late September from the regulator. And I do think maybe some training may be useful for future pension board investment committee, just so everyone understands how far should you go, like where does the buck stop, how much can you do? And it's sort of similar to pension scams, I suppose. You want to protect your members, but you also want them to benefit from technological advances. So some future training on understanding that and what the officers can and can't do. I think that would be quite useful potentially.
Absolutely, 100% agree. Yeah, so I'll make sure that we work out one through with the training officer to once the guidance is available to put on some training for board and committee. I think that's essential. Yeah, I agree. Thanks. Okay, so that was quite a lengthy report. I have skipped through it at some pace, so apologies everybody. Hopefully it's been beneficial to you. What section 5 is trying to do is it's trying to capture the risk, governance and administration implications for all those things above. And that's related to the compliance, operational risk, etc. data. We've already touched on these. So hopefully you've had the chance to read section 5 onwards and find that as a useful summary of all the things that as a board we should be considering, you need to be considering when it comes to seeking assurances from the administering authority in respect to these things. So I was going to draw the report to an end there, Chair. The recommendation is essentially just to note the contents and seek those periodic assurances from me in respect to progress.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. So that's the recommendation, that we note the report. Ian and Graham, do you have any questions or comments before we note the report?
No.
No. Okay.
No, I think the AI is obviously a topic in all areas, isn't it, around the sharing and of data and uploading of that. I was just going back to the dashboards, and I think when we rolled out other dashboards in the past and employee engagement and things like that, is what you get is that initial influx, isn't it, of managing that expectations around perhaps it's someone's not retiring or potentially of retirement age for 20 odd years. And it's how you then deal with those when you've got an influx of maybe imminently retiring people where you need to get their pension data correct. So it with that 10-day turnaround, there has to be, I guess, some managing of expectations there around prioritizing workloads and whether that's fed back, to the overarching governing bodies, especially if there is going to be an anticipated influx of queries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, Graham. Yeah, I think it's, as I say, it's not been done before, so we'll have to wait and see. And we'll have to work closely with the management team at the fund to make sure we manage priorities, essentially. I think that's what that's coming back to. So yeah, thanks for that.
Brilliant. I mean, dashboards are such a brilliant opportunity for the pensions industry to help people understand the value of what they have and ensure people do have enough money in retirement. So I do think it's a really good thing, but there are these sort of challenges. But yeah, no, thank you, Chris. So are we all content to note the report then on that basis? Yeah. Perfect. So can we have that noted? So if we move on to the next item, scrolling down my pages, which is item number 7, which is the governance update on page 29 of the pack. So there's quite a lot of significance for the pension board because we're here to ensure effective governance, and that's why it's got its own section in this meeting. So Chris, can you give this update, and then we can make sure the pension board know what they should expect to see in future meetings on this.
Yes, no problem. Thank you, Laura. Yep. So as I briefly mentioned in the previous report, there was two sets of legislation that were launched on the 30th of June. One in respect of essentially the pooling and investment side of the scheme, and this one is in respect of the governance regulations that came into force on that date. So I try to capture it in an executive summary because again I'm conscious that there's a lot in there. So section 2 looks at what's expected of us essentially. So 2.1 just frames that the governance arrangements within the LGPS is moving away from a compliance-based model to one based on demonstrable effectiveness and accountability. And this is essentially saying that we're going to have clear decision and audit trails as to how and when decisions were made, perhaps evidencing training ahead of any decisions being taken by a committee, for example. So there's a lot more thought that needs to go into how we demonstrate and provide evidence to what we do. 2.2 is outlining the fact that there's a statutory requirement to appoint a senior LGPS officer by the end of December 2026. That's in the regulations with a statutory deadline attached to it. So we've got some work to do on that over the next few months. Existing governance documentation should be reviewed against the new statutory requirements as soon as possible. We've started that already, and you'll see part of that within one of the later items when we're looking at the code of practice from the regulator side of things. I've this morning been delivered an updated version of that tool, which incorporates the expectations within the good governance side of the scheme as well. So we'll work through this new tool, which is essentially a mixture of TPR requirements and the expectations within the governance regulations as well. There's a stronger focus on training and knowledge requirements. It's going to be more rigorous and evidence-based. That comes back to that piece earlier on about us now moving towards an evidence-based environment. We are pretty good at logging training and providing training to our committee and board. We're going to have to make sure that everything that we do now is logged and is evidence-based, as I say, just to be prepared should there be any further scrutiny or investigation into decisions, that we've got the evidence behind that as to why and when they were taken. And interestingly, I think I come on to it a little bit later on, but the requirements within the regulations bring the same expectations when it comes to training to the Pensions Committee as it does to the board. The board have had this in place for some time. It's now in regulation that the committee have to have the same sort of expectations placed upon them as well. Another big item and a new item for us is in 2.5, which is in respect of what's called the independent governance review. There's a need for us to have an independent review completed and returned to MHCLG by the 31st of March 2028. So whilst it's not immediate, we have already started on that journey. We've got to get this by the timelines expected of us, so 31st of March 2028. So those are 5 items that I've pulled out, and I go into them in a little bit more detail in the next couple of paragraphs. So there's a lot within the senior LGPS part of this report. But the key thing to remember is that there's the statutory timeline attached to this. The administrating authority has to appoint one of these by 31st of December 2026. So what this section does is it just looks at the expectations placed upon this role within the regulations. So the LGPS senior officer must have senior responsibility across all the pension fund functions and is expected to provide strategic leadership in those top 4 bullet points there: pension administration, investment management, governance and compliance, and the pension fund resourcing and operational effectiveness. The role is expected to be a key leadership position within the administrating authority, and the expectations included are within those 4 bullet points there. So principal senior officer responsible for pension fund functions, representing the interests of the fund within the authority's senior management function, ensuring that pension fund risks, resourcing requirements, and strategic issues receive the appropriate consideration, and participate in the governance arrangements of the fund's investment pool. It's just identifying in that last paragraph in 3.2 there that there needs to be a clear separation of duties. So the senior LGPS officer cannot be the Section 151 officer, monitoring officer, head of paid service. So it's a new statutory post which we'll have to consider. Within that role, there's significant governance responsibilities which are captured within 3.3. I don't intend to read all those bullet points out for you. They're available for you to refer back to. But there's a lot. It's a key part of this role is in respect to the governance. I just within the last bullet point there, I added in a section about including effective contract management. That was based on conversation with Laura ahead of this meeting, actually. So Laura, if I just read through that bullet point, are you able to just add to that when it comes to the effective contract management, if that's okay? So the last bullet point's ensuring appropriate internal controls, risk management, and assurances arrangements are in place, and that includes effective contract management. So do you mind just fleshing out as to why, based on our conversations, we wanted to add that in, if that's okay?
Yeah, I think it's a new sort of addition. So, and it's sort of linked to what the regulator expects funds to do. So the government have been quite close to the pensions regulators code when they've been doing the guidance for the LGPS. And contract management is becoming increasingly important, especially with you have a pool providing you with services now that they weren't providing you with before. For example, investment strategy advice. You can't change your pool, but you can hold them to account. So monitoring performance of your suppliers and setting expectations to start with. And then monitoring against those is really important for good governance. So I think that's really what the government is trying to, and then the government will probably be aware there's some funds out there who've had advisors for many, many years without reviewing whether they're appropriate to continue. And I think they're just trying to make sure that sort of thing it's not good practice. So you'll be doing a lot of these things already, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. That's really helpful. 3.4 just then looks at the knowledge and understanding expected of the LGPS senior person, capturing those bullet points there. Again, I'm not going to go through them in too much detail, but it's obviously expected to have a lot of understanding of the LGPS, pension fund governance, investment, administration, and the broader public sector governance requirements as well. So there's quite a lot of experience attached to this post. And one of the key things which I've just tried to capture within this last part here is about how it's expected to help ensuring the governing bodies, officers, and other relevant persons receive the appropriate training and support. Training is a big thing in the new regulations, so it's important that this post make sure that it delivers on that and the expectations within the regulations. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what's expected of this LGPS senior officer. I know that you will be familiar with that because we have discussed this previously, but it's captured there in bullet point format for you. That's one of the new things which we have to introduce. The second thing we have to introduce as part of the regulations is what's called the independent person. So what this is it's an expectation to appoint an independent person by the 31st of December 2026, and it's intended to provide an objective, independent support to those exercising delegated pension functions and to enhance governance effectiveness across the fund. I'll come on to that in a bit more detail as we move through the rest of the section. So the guidance describes the independent person as a source of independent expertise, challenge and support, and to not be a decision-making role. It's intended to assist those responsible for making those decisions across the pension fund. And those decisions include the investment strategy and implementation, the governance arrangements, the pensions admin and service delivery, and the effectiveness of governance and continuous improvement across the fund. And it's been designed to complement rather than replace the responsibility of the pension committee, pension board and officers. So it sits alongside those entities to support and challenge where needed and where required. Some clarity we've received is that the authorities may appoint an individual acting in a personal capacity or a suitably qualified organisation with a nominated lead representative. So we've got the option there of appointing somebody directly or a company with a nominated lead representative. And this last paragraph here is just capturing the fact that this role has evolved from the earlier consultation proposals and it's now positioned as a support and challenge rather than a formal committee role. Laura, you're very, very close to this, obviously. When the guidance was first, or the draft guidance was produced, I don't think it was clear whether we'd have to revisit committees' terms of references and schemes of delegations and constitution and whatnot. Have you got any experience of any thoughts around whether we might need to revisit terms of reference of committees as a result of this role at all?
Well, it's a good question, Chris. So when the sort of initial draft guidance came out and this was going to be a member of the committee, then I would have definitely said yes, because they need to be a named member of that committee. Now that they are more of a sort of, they aren't a named member, then perhaps not, but it may be worth having a formal position on the committee sort of or named in the terms of reference that there will be an independent person because it is a statutory role that you need to have. So I would say for good practice, at least, I think you ought to look at your terms of reference and probably have this person on there. Because once, if they don't have them, if they leave or for whatever reason, you do need to replace them within a certain amount of time. So it does feel like it is quite an important role. And yeah, so I think I would recommend that is looked at and added in. I think a lot of funds are, just for completeness, going through that and changing their terms of reference for these new roles. And the other thing is, I suppose your constitution may need to, council constitution may need to be updated to reflect the LGPS senior officer as well, because that's a statutory role.
Yes.
Yeah.
So for board's assurance, so we have already picked this up with the monitoring officer to work through these new regulations and the guidance as well. Apologies, Laura. One thing I didn't do is I didn't stop before moving on to independent person. Is there anything that you wanted to add in respect of the senior officer post?
I can add that. No, yeah, I mean, I think mainly it's just to highlight how significant this role is. The number of responsibilities that are listed in the guidance are, it's quite significant. It's expected that this person is a senior role in the council organisation, so can represent the fund's interests in discussions and things like that. And I think the guidance actually says, got it written down here, the government expects the role to be undertaken by a director, assistant director, or head of service or equivalent in your organisation. So at a grade that can, operate effectively in that leadership environment. So I think that's really important to acknowledge how significant this role is and the level of responsibility that is being taken. So, you're responsible for setting the budget and the business plan and all of those kind of things. So I think it is just to acknowledge and for the pension board to note that those are the government expectations around seniority. And I think Jane's got a question on this.
More of a comment, really, Chair, if I may. I think just to assure the board, really, that we fully understand the requirements, the need, the seniority of this post. And as a 151 officer, I think I welcome having that post to work alongside me to some extent in terms of my Section 151 responsibilities for the fund as well. So, yeah, you should see some proposals working their way through the council. Obviously, it has to go through our governance arrangements, but just to give that assurance that we fully appreciate the requirements and we'll be taking that forward.
Jane, that's really helpful. And I think, just acknowledging your role as well, the senior officer's role on, representing the fund and in the pool as well as the shareholder role. So I think that's really, really significant given the level of assets we're talking about here. It's not a trivial thing to be responsible for. So so thank you, Jane. That's a really helpful comment. Is Graham back in the meeting now? I think he dropped off for a second. Carry on.
So Chair, he was back in at 11:01 and he's just dropped off again this minute. He's going to try to rejoin on his phone, so that should negate any further problems.
I think we'll continue because these items are for noting, I think, and so we can continue till he's back in. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, thank you, Chris. Back over to you.
Lovely, thank you for that, everybody. So just moving on to the other big ticket item, really, that's as part of these regulations, and that's this independent governance review. Again, this is something that's brand new. So there's a requirement for us to have to undertake this independent review and submit it by the 31st of March 2028. So it's not immediate, but we need to start planning for it now. So just a bit of context, this review is intended to go beyond simple compliance testing and examining how governance arrangements work. It's going to be quite a detailed and in-depth review of how the fund's governance framework operates and what sits within it. And I've tried to capture within these next bullet points what it should help us identify as part of the process. So it should pick up areas of good practice, any governance weaknesses or gaps, opportunities to improve decision-making and effectiveness, any actions required to achieve compliance with regulatory expectations, and any improvements to governance structures, processes, resources, and controls. So my take from that is, if used in the right way, this could be a really useful, helpful tool for us to make sure that we're ensuring compliance and develop areas where we might need to strengthen. So I welcome it, and I understand the intention behind it is to ensure that we're all operating from a level playing field when it comes to the governance expectations and requirements within the regulations. 6.2 is just identifying how it really does need to be an independent review, and it just sets out the sort of approach that could be taken and how it needs to be free from conflicts of interest, etc. So again, I was going to stop there, Chair. I wonder whether you had any comments on the independent governance review at all, before I move on to just wrap this report up.
No, I think as you say, it is. It's not just a tick box exercise. The government are quite keen. They've said it's not just a desktop review. So I think it is. It's not trivial. It will take officers time to gather all the evidence, and it's good that you've done the regulator compliance thing, which you're going to talk about in a bit, because that'll be a useful piece of evidence for your compliance. But yeah, it's not a trivial piece of work. It will take several months to complete. So it needs to be planned in well ahead of the deadline, because there will. There's not an unlimited number of providers who you'd like to use for this kind of thing. So who have the expertise and experience in the LGPS. So I think, yeah, just having good planning and making sure you're building that into your business plans would be really useful. And then the pension board will obviously need to ensure the actions that are identified, an action list that comes out of the back of the IGR. So the pension board will be responsible for kind of making sure those and monitoring those after that period of time's happened. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. There's going to be, is it 85 or 86 funds potentially looking for people to carry out these independent governance reviews by the same deadline. So we've got to be careful that we don't avoid or get caught up in a surge of people trying to appoint people and companies to carry out this review for us. So yeah, we're looking at that now as about and how we take it forward. So thank you, Laura. So section 7 is really just me trying to wrap up what we need to do. And not necessarily in order of priority, but orders of work that we need to push on with over the next few months. So those are captured in 1 to 6 there in 7.1, which are appointing the senior LGPS officer, appointing the independent person, reviewing the governance policies and the arrangements, review and strengthen training strategies, develop this independent governance review implementation plan, and increase focus on documenting governance effectiveness and evidence compliance. We do some of this already, but I think it's an opportune time for us to review what we do and how we do it to make sure it's compliant with the new regulations. So the recommendation of this report is, again, just to invite the board to note it and to go one step further should they wish to, and that's to seek periodic updates from me to provide the assurance that we're actually working through these and give you some milestones when we achieve these items as well. So that's the recommendation as written in front of you, Chair. So it's over to you to wrap this one up.
Brilliant. Is Graham back in the virtual room?
Yes.
Graham, Ian, are you happy to follow those recommendations? So note the report and then we'll seek further updates in future meetings.
Yes, yeah, I'm happy.
Yeah. Graham, did you have any other questions or anything before we do that?
No, I'm sure we'll pick it up in future updates and everything like that. But yeah, just the initial thought was how some of those requirements fit into any existing roles, or whether it's a brand new role that's required, isn't it? So, but I'm sure that is being reviewed as we speak.
Indeed, and I think, Graham, that's actually a good point, because I did mean to mention, so there have been some questions around the LGPS, is this independent person doing the job of the pension board? And it's a distinct role to support the committee, and they need to have extensive experience and knowledge in all governance, investment, all of those areas, probably to a greater degree than you would be required to as a pension board member, I would say, just because of how quickly things change and how they're sort of helping making decisions and things like that. So they are doing a different role, and the pension board is still obviously adding a lot of value in what you do. So I think it's important to note that. So sorry for not making that point earlier, but yes. Oh, and on Chris, I meant to ask you as well. Sorry, before we finish this item, what is your timetable for the independent person? Sorry if you've already mentioned that.
No, so we've got to have to be careful what I say publicly here, I guess. Let's just say that the process has started. We are reviewing our options. I'm aware that there's a lot of people looking at this around the LGPS now as well. So in terms of timescales, we haven't got a definitive timescale to say we're looking to appoint somebody by X, Y, Z, but we are aware of the statutory requirements,
Yeah.
and the process has started. It's probably as much as I can say publicly,
Brilliant.
Laura. Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. All right, thank you. No, it's just good to know that it's on the list and it's been worked on. Thank you. Right, so we will note, Graham and Ian, you're happy for us to note the report, and we'll seek updates on that in future meetings. Thank you very much, Chris, for that update. That's really helpful. Okay, so I'll just scroll down to the next item. We are on item number 8, which starts on page 35 of the pack. So this is the update on compliance with the regulator's code of practice. Chris, could you take us through this report as well, please?
Yes, no problem. Thank you very much. So this is presented. Board should be familiar with this item by now, but this is essentially me providing an update on the work that's taken place since the last board meeting on our compliance and our testing against the pension regulators code of practice. So we use a tool to do this, and if board remember when I took them through initial high level look at this a few months ago, the code is broken down into various sections. So we spend our time looking at various sections within the code. So since we last met, we have completed the administration and the communications and disclosure sections, and we've progressed on to reviewing the governing body section within the code. Within that, the board structure and activity section, what we've done is we've strengthened this evidence-based approach that the government is keen to and the regulator are keen for us to take now. And we found this has been beneficial in a number of ways. One way we're using this tool is like a library internally for the team. So we are using this tool as an opportunity to signpost to various policies and various sections within our SharePoint site as to where various policies and documents live, providing the evidence essentially of what we're saying we are able to achieve within the code. So we've been working through those two sections and have started building in this evidence trail to make it easier for us to look for things. Should I say we're compliant with an area of the code? There's a link to the document that says this is why and this is how we're compliant within it. We've also done that in respect to the risk management subsection. We've looked at how risks are identified, evaluated, recorded, and monitored, and then we've considered those against the effectiveness of those internal controls. And again, we started documenting the existing arrangements to ensure that there's alignment between what we're saying and what we're evidencing. So whilst I can't share the actual inner workings of the code or the tool with you today, I can just provide you some assurances when we look at the output a little bit later on. So really the covering report is just to try and give board the assurance that we are looking at this. Where possible, myself, the governance officer and the pension administration manager meet weekly to go through the code. And since we've been looking at this, we've identified a couple of areas where we think we can now progress things and develop things, and we'll touch upon those as I look at the red, amber, green status a bit later on. So that's the report, Chair. I thought perhaps it was intended to be a high-level just discussion, really to give assurance to board that we are looking at it. The output starts on page 37. And really, there's a couple of things in there that I just wanted to identify because as you scroll through it, it might not be obvious or apparent. I mentioned that we've been looking at the governing body section. So on page 40, you can see the red, amber, green statuses of us measuring our progress against the compliance within the tool. One area which we're also doing as well is the tool allows us to look at areas that are not LGPS specific within the code of practice. What we've decided to do is because we think it's best practice actually to consider the industry as a whole, not just necessarily be LGPS specific, but let's have a look at what other arrangements are doing as well and whether we can learn from the best practice of these other arrangements. So within the tool, we've actually worked through the non-LGPS specific ones as well and captured any best practice and brought that across. So what page 40 is showing you is essentially the red, amber, green status of our benchmarking against the code. And ultimately, the aim is to try and move as far to the right, the green section, as you possibly can. But we understand that it will be impossible to be 100% compliant in every area due to the nature of some of the arrangements and the questions asked. But hopefully the takeaway from this assessment that we carried out as officers is that actually we're in a good place. We're in the green in the main across the compliance. It says fully compliant in 3 out of 5 modules. I think we have to accept that we might not be 100% compliant 5 out of 5, for example, looking at the top left box here. But the overall status, we are in the green in respect of our compliance. One One comment that we've added in the bottom right-hand corner here is that we're going to need to ensure the fund is compliant with the expectations within the code, but also within the Good Governance project. And that comes back to my earlier point I mentioned, where we've got a new version of this tool now, which is incorporating those expectations as well. So we'll be in the process. One of our next bits of work will be to migrate the data from this existing tool into the new tool, and just to see where we sit in terms of our compliance. But I think from an operational perspective, it's going to be very handy having both sets of expectations within one tool now. We're not going to be cross-referencing and whatnot. We haven't done that yet, so I'm not able to check how we sit in this new tool. As I say, it was only delivered this morning, so I haven't had the chance to look at that yet. But I think what I'm trying to do as part of this report is try and give board the assurances that we're actually in a pretty good place when it comes to the governance, particularly in respect to those areas that we have had a deep dive into. I'm just going to scroll through, if that's okay, before handing back to the chair. Page 43 has just identified some areas from some commentary that we've put input into the tool. And we've identified that we need to review some of our requirements against the Good Governance project. That was the old terminology in respect to the regulations that have just been launched. We'll update that. But we've also identified that there are some areas where we could review the scheme of delegation in accordance with the Good Governance expectations or the regulations that launched on the 30th of June. We've already discussed that. And one of the questions is around remuneration fee and policy for the fund. So a fund-specific remuneration fee and policy, which we haven't got at the minute, but it's something we could consider within the code and regulations. We could consider having a policy. So we just identified within that area there that we haven't got one, but we could have a look at it in future. It's not essential, but it's something we could consider.
Oh, Chris, I wonder if I could drop in on that point. Interestingly, that fee and remuneration policy was something that was on the draft guidance to include in a full governance review, but it dropped out of the final guidance. So interestingly, the government thought that initially thought you should sort of check that you have one of these, but now they've said it's not a requirement of that governance review. So it's not to say it's not best practice to have one, but it's just so it's still worth considering whether it's worth having one. But you may conclude
that it's not. So, that's interesting. Yeah, thank you, Laura. That I picked up on that. So that's useful to know. Thank you very much. So that was the area we've looked at since we last met. But what I will do is just remind board as we scroll through these pages, there's a couple of areas that might look a little bit odd, and that's in respect of things changing from amber to red and from green to amber. This is nothing that the board need to be concerned about. The way we've used this is a visual aid for us and for board to understand that we've identified a couple of areas within the administration area where we can make some developments and try and improve processes. This is primarily relating to the way we reconcile our employer contributions. With the latest valuation, there's been a change to the level of employer contributions that we receive because the contribution rates have reduced at the last valuation. We need to make sure we have processes in place to monitor that, because less money coming into the fund means we have to do something different in terms of our strategy. So we've identified that's something we need to monitor, and we are looking at that now. And the committee did agree a cash flow strategy towards the end of last year, ahead of this as well. But we think there's some areas that we can possibly use some automation to reconcile and match up our contributions that come in to what we're expecting, etc. So it's a visual aid rather than anything to be too concerned about. But I just wanted to draw that one out in case board looked at that and thought that's a bit strange. Should we be worried about something going to amber to red? It's a visual thing rather than a concern from our perspective. So I hope that's helpful. So really, Chair, that was the thing, the two areas that I wanted to draw out of this tool. I'm obviously happy to take any questions from any of the board or observers here, or take any comments from yourself if you have any.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes. I don't think so. So I think this is really good. This is what the pension board needs to be getting assurance regularly on. So I think this is exactly the sort of thing they like to see. So I think that's really good. I think it's great that you're getting the good governance stuff added into this. And it does feel like this is going to be, as you said at the beginning, early on in the meeting, around evidencing what you're doing is going to be more focused on the fact that you've got all these links to these different bits where you're evidencing what you're doing. I think that's going to really help you hand over the stuff to do the person who's doing an independent review. I know you're sort of self-assessing this at the minute.
Yeah.
So it's great that you've got lots of greens But the fact you've got everything there to hand over to somebody to do an independent review of that is really helpful. So that should save you some cost and some time, hopefully, in doing that process. So the recommendation is that the board notes the ongoing work to review this and to ensure compliance. Are members happy to note the report?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Ian. Okay, brilliant. So I think we're on to, I'm just going to do a lot of scrolling down now to get to the next section. That's
somebody's got a page,
a
that'd be
long but
helpful.
helpful report. Yeah, no, it's lovely to have the sort of red, amber, green things highlighted on there. It's really useful. But yeah, so we'll be on to
Page 69, I think, Laura.
page 69, yeah. Yeah, nearly there. Bear with me a second. Lovely. Right, number 9, which is, page 69. So this is the Wales Pension Partnership update. So this is taking us through some updates to the development of the WPP IMCO following the Fit for the Future government requirements. So are you okay to just talk us through this one, Chris?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is presented for information, really, just to bring board up to speed as to what's happened since we last met. It's difficult to capture the scope of the work that's gone into getting us to this stage. To be honest, it has been a significant piece of work over the past 18 to 24 months. I know Jane and I have been involved in a lot of meetings to get us up to this point. And we've worked collaboratively with colleagues around Wales to get us to this point. So there's been some significant developments, I think, over the past couple of weeks in respect of the IMCO. I won't say any more than that at this point, but this report is just capturing some of those developments in a bullet point format for board. And this was presented to the Joint Governance Committee earlier on in the week as well. So it's a very similar report to what was presented at that meeting. So just for a bit of background, the WPP Investment Management Company is something we had to set up as part of the expectations within the Fit for the Future expectations that the government placed upon us, and that is a financial conduct authority authorised investment management company. Continuing as we were, as the old Wales Pension Partnership was no longer appropriate and it didn't satisfy the regulations of the government's expectations when it comes to pooling and its aspirations when it comes to pooling within the UK. So for us to be able to continue as a Wales identity, we decided to build the Wales Pension Partnership Investment Management Company. So 2.2 is looking at what's happened since we last met. And in respect of governance, every foundational governance decision required before the Financial Conduct Authority are able to authorise has been taken. The shareholders' agreements and client service agreements have been approved by all 8 pension fund committees alongside the year 1 budget and the initial business plan that was presented earlier on in the governance process. We're at the point now where we're finalising these legal documents. So we're nearly there in terms of signing and getting all this authorised. A key point is that last bullet point there. The company is ready to operate as a regulated firm. Essentially, they're waiting for the formal FCA approval to come through. Just to remind board of the timescales that were attached to this initially, the government were working towards a 31st of March or 1st of April, I should say, launch of the IMCO. The FCA were not in a position to be able to authorise the IMCO on that date because the regulations had not taken effect until the 30th of June. So there's a delay imposed on us from the 1st of April to 30th of June by the government because the regulations were not in place. They're now there, so the process is able to continue as a result of that. So since then, 15 people have been either in post or appointed and accepted offers to join the IMCO, and the leadership team has been recruited in full and on schedule in compliance with the expectations under the FCA's senior management regime. So the senior management functions, the SMF roles at the IMCO have been appointed into. Executive teams are in place, include the Chief Executive Officer, Chief Investment Officer as executive directors, supported by Director of Risk and Director of Finance. Independent chair and non-executive directors have also been recruited. So in respect to the people, they've made some good progress in terms of getting those required posts in place. There's an operations update here as well, and then I'll just quickly touch on the governance framework around this before we move on to recommendations. So the FCA application was submitted on the last day of October 2025 in line with the target set out. On the 30th of April, the FCA confirmed its recommendation to authorise was passing through their internal approval. The next formal communication is expected is to be the minded to approve letter, expected to arrive by July 2026. And every milestone within the company's control has been delivered or is ahead of schedule, captured by those bullet points there. So essentially, this report is trying to give board the assurance that everything that we needed to do as officers and the IMCO has been in place and is in place. We're essentially now in the final stages of authorising legal documentation and awaiting the FCA approval. Just a quick reminder in terms of the governance framework as to how this will work on an operational basis. We have the investment management company on one side, and then we have the pension funds and administering authorities as clients and shareholders within this arrangement. So we will own this company as well as being clients of this company as well. So there's two different relationships that we'll have with this entity. And alongside feeding into that, there needs to be the appropriate governance structures in place. Those have been approved. And those are all in place and ready essentially to kick in as soon as the company is FCA authorised. So the message to board is this has been through the appropriate governance channels. It's all been approved by the county councils where needed, been approved by the local pension fund committees where needed, and also approved by the WPP Joint Governance Committee where needed as well. So in terms of an oversight and a governance framework, that's been established and is in place. So that's not included in this report, but that's just one extra assurance which I wanted to give the pension board in addition to what's already presented in this report. So that was it really from a high level, Chair. That was just a whistle-stop tour as to what's happened since we last met. And we're at the stage now where we're awaiting that formal FCA approval and we're working through the final stages to get to that. So I'm happy to stop there and take any comments, whether the Section 151 officer has any additional comments to that, or she's happy just to accept that I've picked everything up. Or Laura, yourself as chair, if you have any further questions or comments on this report.
Graham, Ian, have you got any comments or questions you'd like to ask Chris?
No, all seems to be in hand, and obviously the slight delay, but yeah, everything seems to be as noted in the report, really.
And Chris, what should we expect to see for the next pension board meeting in terms of an update on this, do you think?
Well, I'm hoping that the company will be officially launched by then. I think our next meeting is in October. So I expect there to be some significant movements in the next few weeks, certainly in the next month or so. So by the next pension board, I'm expecting me to be able to provide a more substantive update in terms of being live. That's the hope and the expectation. Alongside this, we're hoping to invite the IMCO along to a joint session between the pension board and the pension committee at some point.
Okay.
So I'd expect the opportunity for the pension board to actually meet some of the senior members at the investment management company to happen around that time as well.
Okay. And the transition for them to provide strategic advice, I think you sort of said earlier that they're not quite set up to do that at this point, but hopefully that will come with time as well. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. But obviously within the regulations, there's the expectation that the investment advice will move across to the IMCO in time. They're probably best placed to advise on to when that would be rather than me, Laura. But yeah, certainly it is the intention to be compliant with the regulations on that one as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe when you have that update from them as a group, you may hear more from that. Okay, that's great. So obviously there's a new pooling guidance and investment strategy statement guidance, which you mentioned earlier, as some of the new things that the government have published very recently. So I suppose once this is all set up and running, the pension board will be interested in to make sure that things are being done in line with those new bits of guidance. So the recommendation is to note the contents of the report. Ian and Graham, are you content for us to do that?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Right then, we will move on to item number 10, which starts on page 71 of the pack, which is the review of the risk register. And in particular, I think we're focusing on the administration items today, Chris. So
yes,
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Just a quick recap. There's 4 pension board meetings a year. We have 3 pillars of the risk register for the pension fund: the administration, governance, and the investment. So usually we spend 3 meetings looking at one of those pillars individually, and then we have a roundup review of the whole risk registers in the fourth meeting. So it's the turn of the administration risk register to be considered at this meeting. But before I get into that, I just wanted to update board, that committee approved 3 recommendations that board made at the last board meeting in respect of the, I believe there was 1 on the investment risk register and 2 on the governance risk register. So there was a bit deeper dive into those 2 risk registers at the last meeting, which is why I've not brought them along to this one. But committee approved the 3 recommendations that board made following their last board meeting. So the focus of this one was to look at the administration risk register. And the opportunity for us to dive into it a little bit deeper if needs be. I have mentioned a couple of times that we have now got a new governance officer in place. So it's my intention is to sit down with them and spend some time reviewing the risk register. And I think that's something we need to do. Primarily picking up from the previous item, the investment management company is on the horizon. So we need to make sure that our operations between the 2 entities are smooth, they do what they need to do, and they're audited and given the appropriate scrutiny. So I think it's an appropriate time for us to dive into the risk registers in a bit more detail. However, having said that, we're not in a position with the governance officer to do that yet. So this is board's opportunity to dive into the administration risk register. In terms of what's on there, I have had a quick review, and there's been no new risks identified internally as a pension fund team. So really, Laura, what I was thinking as part of this item was being conscious that you'll have seen risk registers from other funds in your experience and whatnot. Have you had the chance to consider what's on our admin part of the risk register and whether you think there's anything that maybe you could comment or add to based on your experiences elsewhere?
Hey, Chris, I'm happy to give my thoughts on it. I mean, lots of funds do this in different ways. And so your risk register, the way you've laid it out and everything else isn't any better or worse necessarily than other funds I've seen. So I think if it works for you and if it's consistent with what the council have asked you to do, then I think that's, I wouldn't propose to a big overhaul or anything. Others, like for example, include likelihood and risk scores to give you your current score, which can give an indication of why is it at this level? Is it because it's not very likely, but the impact could be really big, or it's not that big an impact, but it's quite likely to happen type thing. So that could be quite useful for helping understanding the scoring. But again, if that makes it more complicated, then you might want to think about whether you do that or not. And then others that we've seen do have a useful kind of additional bit of reporting, which is like you had on the TPR code thing, where it shows the change since the last time you've looked at it. So this risk was a current value of 4 and it's now a 2, so actually it's a lower risk, so that's good. And then it can help you focus a bit more on the ones that have changed and why they've changed and things like that. So those can be useful things to think about for future when you've got your new governance officer and having those discussions. What I did observe was the numbers 0006 and 007. I felt that they were more sort of funding risks than administration risks, but it might be you don't have a separate section on funding, so that might explain it. But it did feel like, they felt a little bit more like funding issues to me. But it's fine if you want to keep them on here. But yeah,
I think that's probably a decision taken at some point in the past about where do we sit it on those 3 pillars. But maybe it's sat better on the governance pillar, perhaps.
Possibly, yeah. So that Dale Health, given that the admin, I'm sure the admin works well for getting early retirement strains. I'm sure the process for getting the payments in is fine. It's more like how does it affect the funding. So that was that, and then and I thought 002 was good because you do highlight that it's a cyber security risk in part, but not entirely. But you can maybe add in a bit about AI in there as well, potentially. And then the things I observed that weren't on there, which may not be significant risks for you, but are for others, is employers not providing information in a timely and accurate way. And then something around team resourcing. And then having a separate section for regulatory change, because obviously of the things we've talked about today, there's so much work going on that's a risk in itself that the government keep changing things and you just can't manage with it and everything else. And pooling's another example where it's been such a big draw on resources and stuff and time and costs. So those are the only things I observed really from looking at other funds. But like I say, it's easy to understand, easily laid out. So I do think it's a good risk register. So I wouldn't be suggesting you do anything
No,
very
that's
different.
helpful. Thank you. No, just pick on that last comment about the changes to regulations. We actually capture that, and that was one of the recommendations that came from the board actually at the last meeting. That's on the governance risk register
Okay, fine.
in terms of legislation, but I appreciate that one. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think AI is a good shout. I could think about in fact, we spoke about it as part of the regulators update earlier on. I think we could consider capturing AI within the cybersecurity part. It is a risk. It is a risk both internally and for our members too. So maybe I can consider some wording of that one.
Yeah.
What we've done previously then is those are helpful takeaways. Is that I've gone away and I've redrafted the risk register, taken on board board's comments, shared it with the board, and then had approval then to go and take it onto the committee if board are happy with the wording. So I'd make that same proposal now if board are happy for me to consider where we include AI, perhaps as item 0002 as you mentioned there, me to just revisit that wording, share it, and then if board are happy, take it onto the committee. Would that be board happy with that approach?
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah, well, thanks, Graham. Sorry, Laura, you also made a comment about resourcing. We do touch upon key person risk, I think, within the risk register. Whether we could expand that out to include actual resourcing risk as a result of the regulatory changes as well. Perhaps I can just consider that one as well and where that might sit. So again, if board are happy with that, I'll take the same approach on that one and share that after the event.
Getting nods from Ian and Graham, so I think
Yeah,
that's
great.
that's
Okay,
good.
that's helpful.
But was that everything you wanted to cover then, Chris? Today?
It was really, yeah. And just to pick up on your display comments, I guess, Laura, which is how we started this. We have got options within the risk register system to deliver different versions of this output. And I have tried it a couple of ways with various heat maps and things like that. So where risks sit within the heat maps. And I just found it became a bit clunky. The reports are generally, the packs are quite long as it is, on 80 something pages, I think, this one. So yeah, I will take that one away. Perhaps there is a better way of me presenting this information, because it's not the first time it's come up. In fact, at the last committee meeting, there was a comment about risk reviews and whatnot from one of the committee members. So I think maybe that's something for me to take away and have a look at the various outputs that we can produce and whether that might be more suitable as well. So I know Graham will be aware of this from various risk registers, and Jane also from seeing, and Mary, maybe even Ian as well, from seeing all sorts of risk register outputs that our systems are able to produce. So I'll consider that one. Yeah. Okay.
Excellent. Yeah, there's all different ways that you can make it, and it's really so that it's useful for the pension board and the committee when you give it to them to understand what they need to understand within the timescales you've got to talk to them about it. So yeah, but yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay,
Good.
thank you. No, that was it, Laura, for this item. Yeah, thanks.
Brilliant. Oh, Mary's, you've got your hand up, Mary.
Just to say, if Chris wants to work with Bets, our risk officer, on what reporting's available from the system, then I'm sure she's got a good understanding of what can be done. And there may be ways of tweaking some of the standard reports as well, so to make it less long, because sometimes the more detail gets longer, doesn't it? So yeah, I just thought I'd mention that.
No, thanks, Mary. I've actually got an appointment in with Bets actually, I think in August, so I'll make sure I pick this up as part of that meeting as well. Yeah, no, thanks.
Great minds think alike. There we go. Fabulous. Right. So I think the recommendation is that the board notes this report, and we've considered the administration risk register. So I think that's, and you'll take away the things that we've discussed, Chris. So are we happy to move on? Is everyone happy to move on to the next item?
Yeah.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, so next item is number 11, which is on page 77. This covers the standing items, the breaches register, audit reports, and internal dispute resolution procedure.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's over to you, Chris, again.
It is, yeah. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Chair. So just to make board aware, they'll be familiar with this. There's been no new items to add to this. The breaches register is as it is. There's been no new risks identified or breaches identified. Having said that, there's a requirement within this year's annual benefit statements to produce information on McCloud. We're still working through the McCloud backlog, so there may be some cases where we're not able to actually satisfy that requirement in the regulation. So we might have to, at some point, have a consideration about whether that's a recordable breach in terms of our any benefit statements. So Laura, I'm just interested in that email you sent me earlier on. Have you got any thoughts or any comments on that? I think my understanding of that is correct. If we're not able to provide McLeod information to everybody within our benefit statements this year, that might constitute a recordable breach. Is my understandable? Is that correct?
Yes, it will be a breach of the regulation. So, but it may be quite a small number, but it would still be a breach, and there may be good reasons for that. You know, you're still waiting for information from various parties or whatever. But that is the requirement, so that is a breach. But I think you know, it won't. I think what you would do is you would say we have a plan for resolving this, and it's within a reasonable timescale, and being clear about what you're doing. And then I think the regulator won't really. I would imagine that they won't pursue any such reports because I think there's going to be quite a lot of LGPS funds in a position where they're not quite reaching 100% for getting all this information in by that time. There's a lot who are struggling with some software issues as well, for example. So I think that if you are in that position at that time, you won't be alone. And so I think the regulator will take a proportionate view on how to deal with this. But I'm expecting that they are going to issue guidance on the breaches associated with this soon. I'm not quite sure when, but they have said it will be soon. So I think that will be really helpful for you, Chris, to decide how to go forward with this.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, Laura. Thank you. And that echoes the conversations I've had around the industry about this approach as well. We're not the only fund that finds themselves in this position. As Laura's mentioned, there are various software issues and whatnot out there as well. So having some guidance from the appropriate departments on how we proceed and treat with this will be helpful for us, and also as board, you'd be interested in this as well. So whilst there are no new breaches identified on this breaches register, we'll have to consider, once we see the guidance, what that means in terms of any potential benefit statement issues that might be on the horizon. So just wanted to flag that one now. We'll revisit that one once we know more about it, if that's okay. So that was that item, Laura, Chair and Board, but I'm also happy to take any comments or any questions on that one if there are any further ones.
Brilliant. Any questions or comments, Graham or Ian, on this one?
Just on the McLeod stuff, because I have had the odd member question me as to where we're at with that. Particularly, somebody was saying the NHS have got theirs completed. Is it something that is imminent, or is it something that's still quite a way off? Not that I don't want to force you into a date or anything, but
no, that's fine. We'll pick that one up in a bit more detail as part of the KPI item, Ian, if that's okay. In terms of progress, we have made some significant progress when it comes to McLeod, but we're prioritising the cases. So, for example, somebody who's retiring imminently will have all the McLeod work carried out ahead of somebody who might not be retiring for 25 years, for example. So there are people at different stages along this process, but we'll have a look at that in a bit more detail on the next item, if that's okay.
The remedy is a little bit different for other public sector schemes, isn't it, than the LGPS? So
there are some differences, yeah.
Good stuff. Any other questions?
No.
Brilliant. Okay, so recommendation is to note the contents of the report. Are we happy, members, to note the contents of this report?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, Graham. The next item on the agenda was future pension board meetings. The next meeting is the 27th of October, so hopefully you'll have an update on that breach thing by then, Chris.
Yeah.
Is there any other points? I mean, obviously updates to the things we've talked about today, but anything else on future agenda planning that you wanted to mention?
Not at this stage, other than just to reinforce what I said at the start as part of the introduction. We are working through an exercise to try and appoint a new chair to the pensions board, so I'll keep the pension board members involved in progress of that. But I should know more in the not too distant future about where we are with that one, so I'll keep you posted.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think we noted that date. That's fine. So I believe we now move to the private sector meeting. So item number 13. Carry on, Mary. Is this where I sort of say the wording that I'm supposed to read out? Is that at this point?
Yes, please, Chair. And then if we could have propose a seconder and show of hands from committee.
Brilliant. Right. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to read this to make sure I get the words right. The board needs to consider, in accordance with section 106(8) Local Government Pension Schemes LGPS Regulations 2013, whether it goes into the confidential agenda with the public and press being excluded, as some of the information may relate to financial or business affairs of a particular person or organisation. So can I have a proposer, please, and a seconder from the board to move on to the confidential section?
Happy to propose.
Yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. The board agrees that, given there's only 2 members on the board, we unanimously agree to move into the confidential session. So I think that's agreed, and we can now move on. Carry on.